So today is February 24th, Friday, 2023. I am still 20, I almost said I'm 23 years old. I'm 29 years old. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of talk about like this idea of change. Well, first of all, I just got back from the gym. I was doing shoulders and biceps. So I'm in my car right now, sitting out front of the house, so I can talk a little bit louder. And like normally when I make the videos, I'm inside, like sitting in the family room right outside where my wife sleeps. So I have to keep my voice down usually. But anyway, yeah, I'm just I'm gonna be having to deal with a lot of change in my life because I'm literally moving countries. So I'm an American, but I'm gonna be moving to South Korea because my wife has all of her family over there in Korea. She's South Korean. So that's gonna be a big, I don't know, just culture shift, and we'll see if I'm ready to deal with it. But I mean, I loved it over there when I was visiting. One of the things I really love about Korea is just everything is so walkable and everything feels so safe. Like there's so many cafes you can go to, like just to get coffee. There's a bunch of PC cafes if you're into gaming. Like I used to be really into League of Legends, so that's a huge game over there. So that's kind of nice at least. And yeah, it just feels really, really safe. It's very clean. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be, a culture shift for sure. I've been practicing learning Korean, so I do know a little bit, but it's definitely not my first language. So I'm going to be in a country where English is barely being spoken. And I'm going to have to deal with all the culture differences and everything. And I'm going to be far away from my family. So I've never been far away from my family before. I've always lived within a few hours, if not like 20 minutes from my family. Even right now, I'm just, staying with my family before we get to Korea. But, the longest I'd ever been away was like at college or something for, a few months at a time for 4 years. Even that was like an hour away, an hour and a half away. So I could always drive back whenever I wanted. But it's definitely going to be very difficult for me because I'm very close to my parents. So hopefully I can handle that. And I mean, I've gone through change before, luckily nothing too serious or too bad. In the past I've had, basic things that most people probably have experienced too. I guess I can just give some advice on that, on this idea of change from my perspective that I have. Like when I was young, I used to go to like a private school. I didn't go to a public school except for maybe like 2 years, but for the most part I went to a private school. So all my friends for like 10 years are actually from my private school. But then I ended up switching like in high school for 2 years. And that was my first kind of real experience with change, so to speak, because I went to a school where I literally knew maybe 1 or 2 people, and then everybody else was like already friends or already knowing each other. So that was a big taking for me because I had to make friends with people, and I've always been a very quiet individual when I'm not confident or if I'm in a new situation. And like a little bit before that, I actually used to play baseball a lot. I'm actually wearing one of the hats of the teams I was on. But I used to play a lot of baseball when I was young, like on the teams. And I was always the tall, skinny, quiet, awkward kid that nobody wanted to talk to. And it just kind of happened naturally. I don't think anyone like hated me or anything, but I was just very quiet. I just could not produce like sentences in conversation with people. And then everybody on the team already knew each other because I was at my private school, so I had my private school friends, but all these guys were from public school. So I just remember being super quiet and so uncomfortable for like years. And I remember these same kids that went to my, the public high school that I ended up going to. They ended up, I remember one of them told me he was shocked that I was able to actually do well and make friends at the school, like in a nice way. He wasn't trying to be mean, just because that's how quiet I was. It was so just... It was brutal, man. I remember just so many car rides to the baseball practices and everything when I was just completely silent, where everybody else was talking in the car, and then no one ever wanted to like really throw the ball with me or whatever because they knew I was really like clumsy and quiet. But anyway, so I ended up having to go to a school where all of these kids were, and then I just didn't know anybody. So I remember it was a really weird feeling to me, but I was able to get through it by just kind of keeping my head down. And that's kind of what I would recommend to anybody if you're going through change, or if you're in a situation where you're just gonna be out of your element, man. You gotta keep your head down and just make a plan and stick to the plan. So for me in high school, that was just like get to my classes on time and do my work, and then I did make it a point to actively talk to people. I said I'm not going to be labeled as the quiet kid, because I had realized previously that like as soon as you become the quiet kid, that's it. You're pretty much stuck, and then the pressure builds up from there. So I made it a very serious point to myself on the very first day to be the first one talking in the room. Like if I was in a room full of people that didn't know each other, I was going to be the one to talk. So I kind of got through it that way, and I actually was able to make a lot of friends, and I did pretty well there, but I ultimately ended up going back to my private school because that's where all my best friends were. But that was kind of my first experience with change, just being in his area. And I'm sure there's plenty of people who have gone through way worse than that, obviously. And then, there's kids who move around all the time and are constantly changing their friends. But for me, that was a big deal. And I think any situation can be a big deal. Any situation can be a big deal to the individual. So depending on whatever it is for that individual. And then the next time I had to deal with change, obviously, was when I went to college, which is what a lot of people had to deal with. Like, I can still remember, I was like, wait a minute, I've already gone through this same exact feeling before, where I've been thrust into an area that I literally know absolutely nobody. So I was kind of prepared for that. And I did pretty well in college in terms of making friends. I was very quiet. I was kind of always at home. I only had a handful of friends, but that's just kind of how I've always been. That's when I started going to the gym a lot as well, too. So, another thing I would say if you're going through some change is just find a hobby or do something that gives you purpose and just stick to it. Even if you don't have that many friends, it doesn't really matter. Eventually you're going to probably run into people that are similar minded. Even if it's just one person, man, you can just focus on that one person and then establish a relationship with them, whether it be a friend or a girlfriend or a family member or whatever it is. That's kind of what I did at college. I just had my handful of friends. But I can just remember my roommate was having the hardest time adjusting because he could not deal with change, man. He was so homesick. I remember him, he would constantly be missing his best friends back home. And he would be I think he would be crying sometimes. I don't blame him. It was kind of tough. I had this really weird feeling too when I arrived college. Oh my gosh, this is so foreign to me. I don't know anything here. This is a totally new environment. I'm away from my parents. But you just kind of gotta, I was just used to that feeling from, my previous experience at high school. So I'm like, all right, this is gonna pass as long as I have a proper mindset that I just get over this immediately. Just embrace the uncomfortableness and then just push forward. And eventually this new place that feels uncomfortable will become comfortable, and it will become my home. And that's actually also what ended up happening. I ended up feeling more uncomfortable when I would come home to my hometown because I was so used to my college, which was the place that used to be uncomfortable for me. So it's just kind of weird how changing of environments kind of works like that. But yeah, I've had experiences where I've lost friends, not to death or anything, luckily, thank God. But I've had experiences where I've just kind of drifted apart from friends that I was very close with, from high school and everything. So I've experienced that as well. But I've never experienced something like this where I'm going to be, moving countries. So I'm a little bit nervous, but I'm also pretty excited because once again, I do love Korea and I've dealt with change before. I've always been kind of a lone wolf. I just need a handful of people in my life and I'm always happy. I just need a purpose, like going to the gym, for example, or, working on code or doing something that gives me fulfillment, and then just making the people who are close to me happy. And then I'll usually find fulfillment in that. I don't need a lot of stuff to keep me entertained. So hopefully I'm going to be okay when I'm over there. And then the only other thing that's going to be different is I'm going to be at a new job too. So actually I had to leave my job because they would not allow me to work internationally. So now I have to get a new job while going overseas to a new country. So this is going to be quite the experience for sure. But I'm just kind of, I don't know, I feel like it's like I feel like I'm in this river of life. I don't know if you want to call it that. And I'm just like a log in the river and I'm just kind of floating. And I don't know, I'm not trying to resist. I'm just kind of going with the flow. And I've also figured, I've realized in my life a lot of times that's kind of what you have to do, is just go with the flow of things. And the more you try to resist or the more you hang on to something, if you try to go against the flow of the river, so to speak, or the flow of life, it just makes it a lot harder. So I'm kind of just going with the flow, and hopefully it'll all work out. And hopefully I do know my wife's going to be really happy to be with her family, but obviously my family's going to miss me very much too. And I'm going to miss my family and my friends that are here. But anyways, I just thought I'd share that with my future self and whoever else wants to watch this. If you're going through something, if you're dealing with change, just keep your head down and know that a lot of people have to go through the same exact thing to different extents. Sometimes people have to go through a lot of change, like, you know, the death of a friend or a loved one. Sometimes people have to go through a little less change, maybe just, you know, moving to a different state, switching schools. But it can be pretty, I don't know, pretty eye-opening, depending on, you know, once again, the individual and then the situation, if it's their first time dealing with if it's their first time dealing with change. But yeah, I mean, just stay strong, and that's all I got. Good night.